10 minutes before dark, the trail camera catches a doe easing toward a rough black block beside the stand. She stops, circles downwind, stretches her neck, and finally takes one bite. The block is nothing fancy. Molasses, cracked corn, and oats. Bought in feed-size bags, this test portion works out to about $1, depending on local prices and how big you make it. Then the camera flashes again, but one deer means almost nothing. Curiosity can do that. So can one hungry doe, a raccoon, or a rainstorm turning the whole thing soft, like cereal left sitting in milk. The real test starts tomorrow. Does she return? Do other deer follow? Does a buck step in? And does the block stay solid long enough to compete with something from a store? And that was not even the biggest surprise. Something found it before dark, but repeat visits are what matter. Before checking the camera, we need to go back to the messy first batch, because one small decision nearly turned the whole thing into a bucket of sticky livestock cereal. I am just a regular hunter with a mixing tub, a cheap bag of feed, and more questions than clear answers, because homemade deer block instructions are all over the place. Some call for equal parts corn and oats, others pour in molasses, honey, or both, then somehow skip the part where the mixture actually becomes solid. So we are going to test it honestly. I will show you the ingredient ratio, the mixing process, the hardening test, where I placed it, what the trail camera recorded, and the mistakes that can leave you with a loose pile or a block that crumbles in the rain. Now, the title needs one important correction. Nothing pulls every buck. This block cannot repair a bad location, swirling wind, too much hunting pressure, or a property that simply does not hold deer. Success here means it stays together, costs about $1 per test block, and creates repeat visits instead of one quick bite. Before you mix anything, check your state, provincial, county, and property rules. Feeding or baiting deer may be restricted or completely prohibited, especially in areas managing chronic wasting disease. That part is on each of us. What we are testing is simple. Can molasses bind cracked corn and oats firmly enough to survive outside, almost like brown sugar packed into a measuring cup, while still giving deer a reason to return? The recipe sounds almost too simple, but getting the 3 ingredients into a block instead of a loose pile comes down to the ratio. The first ingredient is cracked corn, and I picked it for a pretty plain reason. Deer already recognize corn as food, and the broken pieces give the molasses more surface to grab. Think about coating crushed crackers instead of one whole cracker. More edges, more coverage, and fewer slick kernels rolling around the bottom of the tub. Now, whole corn could probably work, and ground corn may work too, but cracked corn gives us that coarse texture we need if this thing is going to dry into a block instead of turning into pudding. Next up, plain oats. Most homemade deer treat guidance starts with roughly equal volumes of corn and oats, so that is where we are starting too. 1 scoop of cracked corn, 1 scoop of oats. It does not have to be measured like cake batter. The oats fill the spaces between those larger corn pieces and keep the mixture from becoming one heavy lump of sticky corn. It is a little like adding wood chips to wet soil in the garden. The whole pile gets lighter, spreads more evenly, and becomes easier to shape. And that was not even the most important part. Molasses is doing 2 jobs at once. It carries that strong, sweet scent through the dry feed, and then it gets tackier as the mixture sits and dries. Picture the syrup holding a homemade granola bar together. Too little and everything falls apart. Too much, and you have a shiny bucket of feed that never really firms up. That is why I am not giving you one perfect molasses measurement. Humidity changes things. Thick molasses pours differently than thin molasses, and rolled oats absorb differently than whole oats. Start dry ingredients about half and half. Add the molasses slowly, then stop when the mixture holds its shape under pressure. As far as the $1 claim goes, the full bags cost more up front. A small block can land near $1 when corn and oats come from larger feed bags, but you will need to use your local prices. The ingredients are forgiving right up until too much molasses goes in, and that is where the first batch nearly stopped being a block at all. So I grab a disposable bucket, pour in 1 scoop of cracked corn and 1 scoop of oats, and stir those dry ingredients before anything sticky gets near them. That first dry mix matters because the oats want to settle into one layer while the heavier corn sits in another, and then half the bucket binds differently from the rest. Next up, molasses. What we are going to do is pour in a small amount, reach all the way to the bottom, and fold everything upward. Think about mixing pancake batter in a bowl. If you only stir across the top, dry pockets stay hidden underneath. Now, I say a small amount, but my first pour is not small. It comes out fast, probably twice what I intended, and almost immediately the grain turns shiny and loose. You can squeeze it, but as soon as your hand opens, it slumps back into the bucket. Not good. So instead of throwing out the batch, I add more cracked corn and oats in equal amounts, then work those dry grains through from the bottom again. A little corn, a little oats, mix, check. The shine starts disappearing, and the whole thing changes from syrup-coated feed into a damp, tacky mixture. And that was not even the biggest issue. Too little molasses gives you a crumbly pile that breaks before it leaves the mold. Too much traps moisture, slows the drying, glues the mixture to the container, and gives spoilage more time to get started. You are looking for the narrow spot between those two problems. Here is the practical test. Grab one handful and press it firmly for a few seconds. Open your fingers and hold still. If the clump keeps its shape without molasses running between your fingers, it is close enough. Mine holds now, although a few grains still fall off around the edges, and that seems about right for a first attempt. The mistake actually helped because now you can see the correction instead of trusting some perfect measurement that may not work with your oats, your molasses, or your humidity. The mixture now holds in a fist, but that does not mean it will survive a damp night in the woods. So the next step is where the block either becomes useful or falls apart. Now we need a mold, and I almost start packing this straight into a little loaf pan before realizing I never prepared the pan. So go ahead and line it with parchment paper or wipe a very light coat of cooking oil around the inside. A plastic food container works too. You just need something small enough to handle and easy enough to release. I am not making one giant block on this first try. What we are going to do is make a smaller, denser block because it dries faster, costs less if the whole experiment fails, and leaves enough mixture to test a second formula later. Bigger looks impressive, smaller gives us useful information. Next up, packing it. Add about an inch of mixture, then press it down firmly with the bottom of a jar, a short board, or a gloved hand. Add another layer and press again. Same thing until the mold is full. Those loose air gaps are weak spots, kind of like packing brown sugar into a measuring cup. Push the pockets out and the whole block becomes tighter. And that was not even the biggest surprise. The mixture can look solid on top while the center is still soft enough to fold. So we are going to set this in a dry, protected place with air moving around it, not outside in the rain and not sealed inside a damp container. There is no honest drying time, I can promise you. Temperature, humidity, block thickness, and the amount of molasses all change it. Check the outside first. Once it feels firm, gently pull the liner or turn the mold over and see whether the block releases. If it bends, sticks, or sags in the middle, put it back. If the center stays wet after more drying, split the mixture into smaller blocks and give that moisture a shorter path out. Here is the actual test. It needs to come out in one piece, survive being carried across the yard, and shed only a small amount of grain. Mine releases with a little tug, holds its shape in both hands, and leaves a few oats behind. Not perfect, good enough to test. Once the block comes out in one piece, the recipe has passed the kitchen test, but putting it in the wrong part of the property can make a good block look completely useless. Before this block leaves the yard, check the feeding and baiting rules where you live, because a legal camera site and a legal hunting setup may be two different things. Disease restrictions can change by county and season too. I am using this as an observation test, and if hunting use is allowed where you are, confirm that before carrying anything outside. What we are going to do is place it on private property, well away from roads, livestock, public land, and property lines. I do not want deer crossing a neighbor's fence or stepping near traffic because I dropped food in a convenient-looking spot. Next up, finding the route. I have tracks coming out of thick cover, droppings beside the trail, and older camera pictures showing deer already using this corner. That matters more than whatever we mixed into the block. An attractant is like putting a bowl of snacks in your kitchen. It works when people already walk through that room. It does not bring somebody in from 3 houses away. And that was not even the biggest surprise. 10 yards over, there is an open patch that looks perfect on camera. But deer do not feel secure there during daylight. A block in that dead zone may sit untouched while the same block beside cover concentrates movement that was already happening. Placement wins. Now I am clearing 2 branches from the camera frame, setting the block about 12 feet out, and recording the exact time. I want the whole block visible with enough ground around it to identify what approaches first. Then I am wearing gloves, getting out, and avoiding repeat visits. As far as hunting access goes, if it is legal, think about the prevailing wind before choosing the site. Your camera check should not carry scent down the same trail you want a buck to use. Come in from the wrong side 3 times, and this turns into a test of human disturbance instead of deer interest. So the recipe gets one fair chance: active trail, nearby cover, controlled camera frame, and no unnecessary checking. A modest block can concentrate existing movement. It cannot manufacture a deer route. With the camera running and the site left alone, the next question is not whether something eats it, but what arrives first and whether the block lasts long enough for a buck to find it. The first picture comes in just after dark, and it is not a big buck. It is a raccoon with both front feet on the block, looking like he paid for the groceries. Then a doe steps into the frame about 20 minutes later. She stays back, stretches her neck, circles once, and finally grabs a few loose oats from the ground. That first cautious sample matters, but it only proves the site was discovered. Molasses can help deer notice food when they are already nearby. It does not broadcast through the woods and call bucks from miles away. The next thing is watching the order of events. A doe samples it. Another deer sees her standing there safely. Then the site starts feeling normal. It is about like one person walking into an empty diner. Once somebody sits down and eats, the next customer is less suspicious. Now one picture can make almost anything look successful. What we need is repeat visits, feeding time, individual deer, time of day, and how much of the block disappears. If the same doe returns 3 nights in a row, stays 6 minutes, and brings a yearling on the 3rd visit, that tells us more than one close-up of antlers at 2 in the morning. And that was not even the biggest surprise. Some of the missing block may not be deer activity at all. Raccoons can tear at it, squirrels can carry pieces away, and in some regions feral hogs or bears may finish the whole experiment overnight. Rain and ground moisture can soften the bottom too, so a half-eaten block might partly be a half-dissolved block. The only thing I will say plainly is this: no food block can pull every buck, overcome heavy hunting pressure, replace good stand placement, or make baiting legal where local rules prohibit it. It cannot create mature bucks or guarantee daylight movement. That is the line. So far, the useful result is pretty modest. The smell helped nearby animals investigate, and cautious early activity may make later deer more comfortable. Simple woods ideas earn their value through repeated evidence, not a giant promise printed on a bag. The early pictures show the block can be found, but the verdict changes completely if the deer return after the easy loose grains are gone. So we leave the camera alone for 4 full days. No walking in every morning, no fresh boot tracks, no opening the housing just to see if the little screen has antlers on it. The whole point is letting deer return on their schedule. When we finally pull the card, the difference is pretty clear. The same doe comes in without circling, stops beside the stump, and starts working the compressed block. The loose corn and oats are gone by then, so she is not picking up easy crumbs. She has to bite, scrape, and stay there. That tells us the block is doing its job. A firm block works about like a hard loaf of bread on the kitchen counter. You can take a little at a time, but you cannot scatter the whole thing with one swipe. That slower feeding keeps the site active longer and gives more deer a chance to find it. Now we get another step up. On the 3rd night, a buck walks into the same position, checks the ground, and feeds from the block for several minutes. That proves the location and the food held his interest. It does not prove he will show up in daylight or walk past a stand during hunting season. And that was not even the biggest surprise. The better result was durability. The firm batch still had a solid center after several visits. Our softer batch looked good going into the woods, but within 2 nights it was broken apart, dragged around by raccoons, and turning into sticky oatmeal after a light rain. So, as far as the verdict goes, molasses, cracked corn, and oats can make a functional, low-cost attractant where it is legal, especially for trail camera inventory at a spot deer already use. The homemade version saves money, and you control each batch. Make it firmer, smaller, or less sweet depending on what happens. The only thing I will say is that it is not as weatherproof or as consistent as a manufactured block. One homemade batch may cure perfectly, and the next one may soften because you added a little too much molasses or caught 2 damp days. That trade-off points to the part nobody puts in the dramatic title: the commercial block is not useless, but it may be selling something different from what hunters think. That expensive bag is mainly selling you time. You grab it, throw it in the truck, and set it out without measuring molasses, cleaning a bucket, or waiting 3 days for a block that may still feel like wet cereal. You also get the same formula every time: harder compression, a nutrition label, cleaner transport, longer shelf life, and better weather resistance. It is like buying a loaf of bread instead of mixing dough in your kitchen. You are paying for repeatable results and less mess. And that is not even the biggest point. Corn, oats, molasses, mineral mixes, and feeding sites have been discussed in hunting guides and forums for years. Nobody is hiding 3 pantry ingredients from you. The dramatic secret is mostly a better title than it is Wood's knowledge. Here is my opinion, and you guys can push back on it. The homemade block wins when you want a cheap, adjustable test. The commercial block earns its price when convenience and durability matter more. Either one only deserves credit where baiting is legal, deer already travel, and the camera shows repeat visits instead of one exciting midnight picture. Because the deeper mistake is buying any attractant before checking security cover, access pressure, wind, and the trail itself. A block cannot fix a bad location. Useful knowledge is understanding why deer returned, and whether you can make that happen again. So after the mixing mistake, the drying weight, and the camera test, there is one fair answer to whether this dollar block actually pulls bucks. So the honest verdict is this: the block can encourage repeat visits and may bring a buck into a legal, well-chosen site, but it will not pull every buck, and some nights it may become raccoon dinner before daylight. The useful part is concentration. You are giving deer already moving through the area one reason to pause, like setting a coffee cup beside the same chair every morning. What we are going to do is mix roughly equal amounts of cracked corn and oats, add molasses slowly until a squeezed handful holds together, pack it firmly into an oiled mold, and let it dry all the way through. And remember, the $1 claim means one small portion when the ingredients are bought economically. Buying every bag and container upfront costs more. So check your local wildlife regulations first, then make one small test block. Do not risk a bucket-sized batch on attempt 1. Put your drying time and general climate in the comments so we can compare what actually holds. Thanks for watching, and go ahead and like and subscribe. Come back for the weather resistance update after rain and every hungry non-target animal gets a chance at it.